Today we have the very globally renowned Honorable Dr. Sherri Kimes to share with us about restaurants in the post-COVID world. Now, I know we're all very curious about this because we've seen with the different countries and different restrictions that we have on F&B, how different businesses and restaurants have had to pivot and change their strategy in order to survive, right? So with that, I'll leave you with Sherri to start our today's session. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Lehman, and thanks, Charlene, and good morning, everybody, or at least good morning from Singapore, where we're all very excited because our restaurants actually get to open up on Friday, well, kind of, sort of. And so what we're going to be talking about today is restaurants and really kind of, F&B outlets in the post-COVID world. And again, you think about this 6 months ago, if someone had said the word COVID to us, we would have said, what? We would have had no idea what they were talking about. So this is, we're going to have, we'll see how long the content is. And you just think about what we've been through the last little bit, closed due to coronavirus. I mean, all of this kind of going on with our restaurants. And those of us who like to eat, like me, it's been kind of a challenging time for all of us. And so the question right now, especially I'm a revenue management person, so I always think of things in revenue terms, is how can you generate the same revenue given these new constraints? And so some of the constraints are, well, you've got to be a meter apart, well, you can't have this, you can't have that. But now we have to be able to still generate revenue from that space. So what do we do? What are the different options that are available? And so with this, let's kind of step back. I wanted to go back and look. As a researcher, I always kind of like to say, okay, did the stuff I did in the past actually have any value? And so I went back and looked at some of the stuff that I've done with restaurant revenue management. And I know some of you have seen this, and if you haven't, all of my papers and everything like that are on my website. So you could always just go get them there. It's just there. And so I've got this whole thing about a toolbox. And where this came about was probably 30 years ago. For some reason, I was taking a windmill technician class. Who knows? I think I was bored. And I was up in the air about 20 meters. We were working on a windmill. And by the way, do not ever hire me as a windmill technician. I don't remember any of it. And I was working with some people, some of the other students in the class were non-English speakers. And their English was such, and think about your language skills. If you ask for a screwdriver, they might hand you a hammer. And no one really wanted to work with them, as you might expect, because it was kind of a little bit disconcerting. And I started thinking about this whole thing, about how you're pulling the right tool out of your toolbox. Because a lot of times with revenue management, we might pull the wrong tool out, particularly when we start to move out of the room sort of side of things. And so I kind of broke this into hot strategies and cold strategies and all-purpose tools. And think of this as the different shelves in your toolbox. Hot is when it's busy, when you've got excess demand. Cold is when it's not busy. And then all-purpose tools are things that work no matter what. And so when you look at this, we are in a stage, well, let's just look at the all-purpose tools. Things like menu engineering and menu design and server mentoring and upselling, these always work. So these are tools that you always want to have at your disposal. But then we can kind of look at the hot tools and the cold tools. Most of us right now are not in what would be called a hot stage. There's not enough business, but things like table mix. Improving your table mix, even if your table mix is crappy right now, doesn't make any difference probably because you don't have enough customers. But let's look at the cold ones. The table mix doesn't matter so much. The distribution channels. Does this sound familiar? Just like what we have in hotels. Promotions. How do we go about strategically putting together the right promotions? What kind of pricing should we be doing? And how can we be selling things? And these are things that, always work during a slow period. And so again, keep the toolbox in mind, but let's just kind of look to see what some of the other trends are that have been going on in F&B around the world. And there's basically two huge trends. One is with off-premise dining. And, we've all seen this with, delivery. I mean, I think all of us have been doing a lot more delivery than we normally would. And a lot of hotels have started offering this too. And a big drive for technology in the restaurant experience or the F&B experience. And it's been kind of there, but it hasn't been as widely adopted. But the last few months have really kind of sped things up. And if this is with online restaurant delivery, so this is with Statista, and this is worldwide. And with platform to consumer, this is basically talking about things like, Uber Eats or Grubhub or Grab Food or Food Panda or something like that. And this is restaurant to consumer delivery. So here we are, 2020, and this was adjusted for the impact of COVID. But look at this. I mean, it's going up dramatically. And in some markets like China is just, it's amazing what's happened there over the last 5 years. And then the other things are looking at technology. And a lot of this now, especially when we start talking about contactless services, payment, ordering, robotics. And again, you'll see some of these come through. So these are some of the trends that are going on. But let's just kind of go back to our problem, which is how can we make the same amount of money or more money from from a reduced capacity, essentially, or we have some constraints that we have to deal with. And so there's kind of two approaches. One of my former students who's been helping me a lot told me I should come up with a nicer word than tweak. He said, use alter or adjust. It sounds more professional. Tweak is what I want to talk about, tweaking things a little bit. And then the other is innovation, because there's been a lot of very interesting innovations that have gone on. And so when I look at this, so let's just kind of look at the tweaking the tools in the toolbox. So back to our toolbox. With this, we've got the various tools that we had before, where we've got the pricing and we've got the upselling. We have the menu design and the promotion and the distribution. So this is what the different distribution channels that are out there, whether it be for restaurant reservations or for ordering, for delivery and various things like that. You want to be using these to your full advantage. These are tools that are going to always be available to you. But then let's kind of look at, okay, what can we tweak? I was at a really interesting webinar yesterday that was on, I think they called Damn the Outlets or something like that. It was a bunch of restaurant designers. And it was interesting because, again, they were coming at it from a design perspective, but they were talking about, why do we call them outlets? Why don't we just call them restaurants? And they made some interesting points in it. So outlets. And then banqueting, okay, if depending on what country you're in, if you can't have large gatherings, how are you going to do a big wedding? I mean, so you've got that kind of stuff. And in-room dining, do people really want to have someone coming into their room with a room service cart right now? I don't know, but might they want to stay in their room and eat? Maybe. And so what sorts of things can we do? And so when I look at this with the outlets, we've got some challenges there. We've got the reduced capacity. So what do we do about that? And again, depending on what country you're in, and depending on what stage you are and working through this, like here in Singapore, the restaurants get to open on Friday. And they've got the 1 meter apart. There could be no more than 5 people at a table. I don't know why 5, it's just 5. But some countries might be 2 meters. So it's all over the place. Managing, how do we manage capacity? And then also kind of looking at some of the different concept types. And so when I look at the impact of reduced capacity, you've got a variety of things. You can look, the impact on the kitchen, the impact on your restaurant layout, and then also with looking at the staffing. And think about the kitchen. Those of you who've worked in a restaurant kitchen before, they're not social distancing, that's for sure. They're right on top of each other. And how are we going to manage all of that? When we start looking about the layout, how do we lay out the tables and how do we lay out things so people can maintain this distance? Now, this is obviously not going to hold forever. Hopefully in a year or two, things are settled down, or some people hope, of course we all hope it would settle down tomorrow, but it's probably not going to happen. And so the layout, there have been some kind of funny ones on here. Notice that these are not real people. These are mannequins. I thought that was kind of funny. You're kind of putting them at tables that cannot be used. Of course, then there's some other very strange ones, which are having people with pool noodles on their head. I don't know that I would recommend this for your F&B outlets, but but basically it's some way of indicating to customers that they need to stay apart. And then the staffing. I mean, what's going to happen with the staffing? And then even, I'm talking about from a how do you do the staffing, but then also, I mean, there's all sorts of other things in terms of the hygiene and safety and things like that. And so with managing capacity, we've got to look at things here with, managing your reservations. And so, for example, your restaurants, when they first open up, and this is, again, I'm here in Singapore and we are 2 days away, and I think people are counting the hours. The busy restaurants are all full for the weekend. Now, but think about this. If they've got to maintain the distancing, they can only take so many reservations. They don't want to have a lot of walk-in business because then they don't have control. So how do you do this? I mean, you only have so many slots. How do you go ahead and make sure you use the capacity you have to its best capability? Managing meal duration. You might, in a situation, normally we're a little bit hesitant about, say you could only have the table for an hour and a half, but right now you need time in between to clean everything before the next party comes in. So you might see some of that coming on, and then using some of your other capacity within the hotel to be able to do this. And this is kind of an interesting one. And I found this great website. I would highly recommend it. It's called covidinnovations.com. I think I'm not sure where it was from. I think it was out of Sweden maybe. And it was about this restaurant, which I'm not going to even try to pronounce this, thinks new in Corona times, making restaurants out of empty rooms. And they went further and talked about how they were turning empty rooms into private dining rooms. Interesting idea. And then looking at the different concept types. Okay, buffets. Now, right now, just take a look at this picture and all those hands and all that food. And if you're like me, when I'm looking at that, my visceral reaction is, ew. Now, before 5 months ago, we would have all been just happy with all of this. But what are we going to do with buffets? Is it the end to buffets? What about self-service? What about grab and go? I mean, again, thinking through these. And as a revenue person, you need to be thinking, how can I generate revenue from this? I mean, so we're obviously not going to be tweaking the operational details, but what sorts of things can we do? Some of the things that are going on with buffet, depending on what part of the world you're in, plated buffet or a la carte buffets, or the grab and go, of course, we've had that before, but rather than having the breakfast buffet, having somewhere where people can just grab their food and go. Banqueting, and again, you've got the constraints of a maximum gathering size, and then, despite what some people have said, business travel, it's going to be a while. And so there's not going to be as much business travel, and we'll have the same thing with rooms, and then the budget is going to be reduced. And you could also see, look at how we're meeting right now. We're on Zoom. And you could see a lot of CFOs going, so why should I give you a business budget? Why should I give you such a large budget? Can't you just do this by Zoom? So, I mean, it's something we need to be thinking about. Yet, in full service hotels, you might have lots of banqueting space. And as a revenue person, what are you going to do with that? I mean, you got to figure out some way to put that to good use. And there's some really creative sorts of things going on. And again, I'm kind of throwing out some examples because I want you to be, because you're going to have to get innovative and creative with this, is catering. Okay, if the groups can't come to us, can we go to them? And this would be obviously more for local kind of business. Branded partnerships, bringing people in, bringing other companies in with the name brand, where they're using some of your space. Pop-up events, pop-up restaurants, things that you can use your space to be able to generate additional revenue. And with this too, I mean, you could think about even some of your restaurants. If you have some restaurants in your hotel that are particularly popular, why not, at least for the next little bit, when you're limited with space, why not use some of your banqueting space for that? So there's all sorts of different things. And these are some examples I've seen. I think this was in Sweden again, so it must have been from that COVID innovations. Getting married right now. I mean, I saw a picture the other day where people had their masks on. I went, oh, that's so sad. But still having a special wedding. And so this was one, and I think the limit was 14 or 16 people, and they created a very special kind of event. Or you could see here, okay, this is, they're showing their distancing and everything, but business meetings with having part of the people there, but then also some of the people brought in by video conference, so not just Zoom or WebEx or something done really well. So using your facilities for a much more professional meeting sort of thing, or live events. I mean, there's some great things that have been going on with this in terms of nightclubs, because, for example, one of the nightclubs here, Zook, I mean, they said, well, it's pretty clear we're not going to get to open for a while. And so what can we do to stay in business? And so they've been doing kind of virtual concerts and virtual events and all sorts of different kinds of things there to try to generate additional revenue. And then with the reduced business travel, and again, are there other market segments that are out there that might be interested? And I mentioned the whole thing, with virtual meetings. I mean, what could be done with that? And then in-room dining. Well, one of the things we need to think about is the hygiene and the social distance, or social. I think actually I keep using social distance. Safe distancing doesn't sound quite as horrible. Social distancing just seems like an oxymoron. How do we deliver it? How do we deliver that in-room dining? And then, the mini bar. Again, think about the mini bar. And, when I think about it right now, I go, ew. But I mean, do we want to have it, or what would we do with it? And then the financial viability. I mean, people have been, hotel people, particularly finance people, have been complaining for years, in-room dining doesn't make any money anyway, so let's just get rid of it. But will the guests want it, particularly now, where they're a little bit concerned about exposing their family and themselves to others. And then the hygiene and the social distancing. Okay, again, back to, I mean, this looks like a very nice guy, a very nice setting, but really, do you want that going into your room? And then, obviously this is pre-COVID. Does he want to go into your room? I mean, it could be unsafe. And then we get into some of the normal things we see in hotels. I've been writing my friends, this was for one of my friends in the US who actually went to a hotel. I said, find some pictures of dirty room service carts. Yeah, there we go. Just there in the hallway. That really doesn't do it. And think about room service menus, sometimes, ew. And that's going to have to become kind of a contactless sort of thing as well. And what you could be using with technology for that sort of thing. Delivering in-room dining. Now there's some interesting things going on with this. And this is kind of really maybe more in the restaurant side than the hotel side, with offering special packages. And so this is one, let me just kind of switch back here. Special packages, like I've seen one where we will deliver some kind of a special event. So it could be, it could be beyond the romance package of champagne and chocolates or something like that, but some kind of like a TV night or something, or game night or something like that, that has games and various things like that, for people who might feel uncomfortable still going out. Grab and go, robots, and then you could outsource the delivery. But then what are you going to do when those people, the delivery drivers, get to the hotel? You don't want them running around the hotel. So, and then there's a cost associated with that. And so, with this, we could have robots deliver it. I mean, that's out there. So that's an option. I don't think I want this guy delivering it in his full hazmat suit, but I mean, I've seen some pictures from the airline industry. That scares me, actually. But robotics might be something to look at. And again, think about this from a revenue perspective. We still get the food to the guests, but we don't have to have that social contact. It's got some cost implications as well. Not only the cost of the robot, but also the cost of, you don't need the labor quite as much. And then, the other side of this is looking at not only the tweaking side, but looking at kind of the innovating side. And with this one, there are all sorts of different things out there. There's delivery. There's ghost kitchens. And ghost kitchens, I mean, I'm not talking about ones with ghosts in them, but kind of a remote kitchen. And then are there other sorts of offerings that are out there that we might be able to pursue? And so with delivery, I just pulled one. This is from the Park Royal here in Singapore. And, island-wide delivery and self-pickup of gourmet dishes. And so many hotels have done delivery. And I was reading some stuff on hotels in China and how they got through all of this, because I've read that occupancy is up to 60%, so things are improving a lot. And delivery is what kind of got them through the really, really bad times. And it's something that hotels have never really gotten involved with before. But it's got there's some potential, there's a lot of potential there. Now, there's also a lot of issues with it because you could do the delivery yourself. Okay, there's a lot of costs associated with that. You could have a third-party delivery company do it for you. 30% commission, sound like OTAs? You've got that kind of thing too. Yet at the same time, you've got a lot of unused capacity in your kitchen that you could be using to generate revenue. And again, what I'm thinking, okay, you think about this, if you don't have the same number of rooms, if you don't have, your restaurants can't have as many people, your spa can't have as many people, how are you going to be able to generate revenue? That's the kind of thing I'm trying to throw out to you. I mean, you're going to have to be really innovative. I was talking with a restaurant operator yesterday, and he's excited about restaurants opening, but 70% of his restaurants are in a downtown area, and people aren't going back to their offices because they're supposed to still work from home. So what can he do? We sat there and just kind of brainstormed on different sorts of ways. That's kind of the stage that we're in, or the nightclub operator saying, okay, I'm not going to be open for a while because of the coronavirus situation. So what am I going to do to stay in business? That's where we have to be as revenue people, to be thinking through these ideas. And it's not just the revenue people, it's the sales and marketing people, and particularly sitting down with your F&B team to kind of come through with these different sorts of ideas. And they've probably been doing a lot of innovative things throughout all of this, and taking those, and are there some that you can continue into the future? So think about this with delivery and self-pickup. A lot of restaurants have done this during when there were restrictions, various lockdowns, but is this a viable revenue stream for the future? It might just be. And so that's one that you want to be looking at. Another one that's kind of interesting is ghost kitchens. I mean, you think about in hotel F&B, we have huge kitchens. And that was one of the things in the webinar that I was at yesterday. The restaurant design people were talking about, particularly hotel F&B, said, why are their kitchens so big? They don't need to be that big. But okay, think about this. If this is sitting idle, are there ways that we can use this? And could we use this capacity as a ghost kitchen? And basically, if you haven't heard that term before, what that is that you can either lease this out to other restaurant concepts who use your facilities to make their food, and then it's delivered out. I mean, but basically it's having different people. So it's kind of an outsourcing thing. Make the food there and then get it out to others. So it could be multiple concepts in there. Something to think about, and it's something that some hotels have been experimenting with. And especially go back to the trends that we talked about earlier on, there's been a huge increase in off-premise dining around the world. That might be a possibility there. Some of the other things going on, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, is kind of retail and online. So this is a restaurant, let's see, we can buy, this is their online store. We could buy their 13 Wonders chocolate mahjong cake. Okay, that looks interesting. We could buy their set menu. This is for 2 to 3 people, for 4 people. But it's got all these different things. And basically you go, it's retail. Or this is one where a lot of bars hotel bars have started delivering cocktails during all of this, and it's been very successful, and it's something that they had never thought of before. And so if there's a signature drink or something like that, why not? And this one is is interesting. It's from a restaurant, Luke's Oyster Bar and something or other here in Singapore. And the owner is a former student, and he's very passionate about English muffins. And so he said, we were sitting there racking our brains about how to stay open. It's a full service restaurant. They're closed for 2 months. And so what can we do? And well, one of the things they came up with was English muffin kits. And so they, so this one, I forget which, they got different ones, whether you can have a English muffin breakfast sandwich, or you can have English muffin hamburger, and they send all the ingredients to the people, and then they make them up. Another thing he's been doing that's really innovative is a wine tasting series, a wine tasting webinar, basically. And so he sent, I think he had four bottles of wine that was sent out to customers. And I think he just finished the 70th episode of his wine tasting thing, trying to make that connection. Very, very innovative. And it's something that he said, wow, we never thought anything like this would be successful, but it has been. And I think we're going to continue these sorts of things in the future. So a lot of interesting innovation going on. But you're kind of back to your question, our question at the beginning is, how can we generate the same revenue given the post-COVID reality? And it's just kind of this is what we have to deal with. And I think as revenue people, a lot of times, we're so used to dealing with rooms, and we're used to dealing with, okay, things are always the same, kinda, but they're not the same now. And so looking, and right now, if there's going to be a limit to how much you're going to be able to do with rooms revenue, because people aren't traveling yet, right? And they're not going to for a while, except domestically. What are other ways that you can generate revenue? It's a great opportunity for you to be able to differentiate yourself. And my presentation, this is the first time I made it, was actually a lot shorter than what I thought it was going to be. But let me just kind of give you some advice, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Use your toolbox. Remember, it's got 3 shelves: the all-purpose tools of menu engineering, the menu design, and server mentoring and upselling; the cold tools, which are going to be promotion and managing your distribution channels and so forth; and the hot tools. Right now, mostly of the time, you're not going to need the hot tools. If you've got a bad table mix, fine, let it be for right now. You can fix that later. Pull the right tools out. Tweak. You've got the different parts that you can tweak. So whether it be looking at your different outlets, or looking at your banqueting, or looking at your in-room dining, what can you do to generate more revenue from what you have right now? And then innovate. See if you can come up with other ways to be able to, new and interesting ways to be able to help generate revenue. And for revenue people, that's what our job, that's what we do. I'm sure a lot of your friends, they think all you ever do is think about revenues. Like, well, yeah, so, but that's what we do. And this is a wonderful opportunity. It's an unwanted opportunity, but take full advantage. I'm sure you've heard this quote from others, but I love it. I guess it's the old Winston Churchill quote of, "Don't waste a crisis." This is a time that can bring a lot of innovation. So thank you very much for your time, and let's open it up for any questions.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the presentation, Sherri. I loved it. I have so many questions. So before we start the ball rolling, I'll just have one question that I wanted to discuss. I think in restaurant revenue management, one of the key limiting factors used to be capacity, right? Because, for example, in a typical restaurant, you have maybe 50 seats, and it's about maximizing RevPAS. But with COVID, do you think that it is not so much about capacity, but about how you can deliver the product to people because of the delivery option? So the concept of capacity is changing with what has happened.
And I think that's a really good question, because concept of capacity has changed. And so obviously, okay, if we have reduced capacity, so let's say we have 50 seats, now we have 20. Okay, so we have to make sure that we use those 20 seats to the best of our capability. But what are you going to do? I mean, you can't do it through price. You can't just say, okay, we're going to charge 2.5 times as much so that we can make the same amount of money. That's not going to work, right?
Although we would love
So
to.
yeah,
We would
that's
love
not
to.
going to work. But that's not going to work. Customers are going to go, yeah, right. But we can do, okay, so then that's when we have to, what are the other capacities that we have? And so we have a lot of excess kitchen capacity. We have staff who are, if we're only operating at, if we can only operate, I'm saying 40, let's say 40 to 50% of our capacity, which is probably, let's just to be, just say 50. I think it's probably lower than that. What are our staff going to be doing? And so are there other, we could lay them off, but do we really want to? So what are other things that they can be doing? Can it be delivery? Can it be, all these other kind of off-premise dining? Because there's some wonderful food in hotel restaurants, and why not get that out to people? I mean, so yeah, so it's kind of a different definition of it. And I think just like with guest rooms, we got some of the same challenges. Again, depending on which country you're in, I've read some, okay, well, every other room's got to be empty. Okay, if that's true, I mean, we have the same problem, right? Because you can't, I mean, that just is, or you have to have, every other room's got to be empty, and then there's got to be at least one day between the time between guests. Oh, I mean, that's kind of the basic, how do we work around that? And that's where we have to get creative.
So before we go into some questions, other questions that you have, I just want to remind everyone that we have a Q&A function on the Zoom. So if you have any questions, just type them into the Q&A function and we'll read through them and discuss them. So I think, Alexander, you're raising your hand, but we actually can't speak to you. You have to type your question in the Q&A and then we'll be able to look at it and answer. So Professor Kimes, we have Yvonne. She was asking if hotels are in temporary closure and expect to reopen with only a very low occupancy for the first few months, how do you think they should restage the opening of existing F&B outlets?
Well, I mean, I think first thing is take this time to think through things, because you can look, I mean, and the other thing that I'm finding really very useful when you're taking the time is look at other countries that have been opening up. Particularly, I mean, look at what's been going on in China, look at what's been going on in Australia, and so forth, to kind of see how things are moving along and what's worked and what hasn't worked. I think, making sure that you're going back and looking at the processes you have and where, what's going to be an issue. So like, for example, your menus. I mean, I also had one of my friends send me send me some pictures of dirty menus. There's some disgusting things out there, whereas before we would have kind of gone, oh, look. Now we'd go, ew. And so what about the technology that we can be using? So how can I kind of rethink my processes? And then I think also with the menu, what are some things that we can be doing? Things that we might normally not have enough time for. How can we redesign the menu? How can we do menu engineering better? What should we be doing with our pricing? Why do we have this stuff on the room service menu? I mean, a lot of all that kind of stuff. Getting your eggs in a row, and so that when you're ready to open, you've got it. Because right now, the luxury we have right now, and we've all seen this. We're all here today. Is we have the luxury of time.
Yeah.
And well, I mean, whether you want to call it a luxury or not, but it's back to the don't waste a crisis. Taking full advantage of this to be planning.
So I think it's about, to sum up what you're saying, is about being more insightful, right? Like looking at the data that they have and maybe relook like the things that you would want to do with your new guests or new ways of delivering the F&B to the guests, and how you can change that with all the tools that you like that, right?
Yeah, and I think with that too is going back and you think about, I mean, you could let's just take a hotel check-in, for example. So, okay, so why do we make people go to the front desk? Well, because we've always made people go to the front desk, and there's some reasons. We need check passport, check payment, and stuff like that. But but it's kind of why. And so especially now, when you think about your F&B, well, why are people doing this? Why do we make them do that? And you're kind of thinking at it from the mind of the customer. I think is something that's something that we really need to do. And a lot of times, not that we don't want to usually, but a lot of times we just don't have the time. The other thing to be doing right now for F&B is restaurant data. And Lehman, you know this well. I think the data is dirty. I mean, oh yeah, there's two rules of data. I tell students, rule number one, you can't get the data. Rule number two, it's dirty.
Yes.
And it's terrible. And we don't have time to clean up the data. You do now.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's something to be
fun, right?
No, oh no, it's horrible. But if you don't have clean data, I mean, it's the basic garbage in is garbage out.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so another question we have from Natasha. She's asking, do you see any new metrics to measure performance? Because I think as we're revisiting how we look at revenue management, so maybe like a metric like RevPASH might not necessarily be so relevant now. How can we look at it maybe a bit differently?
Well, that's interesting. And Natasha, I mean, okay, let me think, because not RevPASH. I mean, it's going to be looking at all of my this kind of goes back to your question, Lehman, looking at all my productive space. So I've got, I mean, so basically my area, I have so many square meters in my restaurant outlets, in my kitchens, in my banquets. How do I use that money to generate revenue? And I would look at it from an asset manager's or owner's perspective, because you think about right now they are probably having, they're having major challenges right now, shall we say, because they can't really yell at the hotels because, well, they can, but I mean, but I mean, but they need to cover their payments and everything like that and maintain cash flow. So they were going to be looking at, okay, why? Okay, here's another question: why do we have that outlet? Why are we putting so much money into that? And so, but I mean, but I think looking at, so I mean, if I was going to do anything right now, I probably would be looking at revenue or profit per square foot.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. I think one question I was thinking about as you were sharing was, I noticed, at least within the Singapore context, a lot of the key brands in F&B that already have a brand name, when they move to COVID or, a lockdown perspective, they were able to still generate quite strong sales because people know the brand. Do you have a perspective about some F&B outlet that maybe is not so well known in a brand? And in this situation, how they must pivot, right? Because maybe last time in their context, like it's location specific, so the traffic would generally walk by and consume the F&B. But with COVID, they have to change it so drastically, and they have to try to find and get their name out to get people to order from them. So I think that's a very different challenge that a small F&B might not, go through. Yeah. And how would they?
With that one, and it's kind of, if you think about it, it's kind of like a small independent hotel in OTAs.
Yes.
If you're running a small independent hotel in Bali, you don't have a marketing budget. I mean, well, you do, but it's like that big. And so OTAs are an attractive way to distribute. And I think it's the same thing, for a really small outlet, is that they don't have a marketing budget. They don't. And then the other thing I would say, and marketing people who are in the group, I mean, particularly the digital ones, this is a time for them to be using social media. Because that's how they're going to be able to reach a lot more people, because they've got to get creative with the way they're doing it. And if there's nobody, but think about it, okay, if nobody's coming by, you need to stay in business. How are you going to? And so for restaurants, the OTA equivalent is the third-party delivery companies, and yeah, they take a 30% cut, but can you make? I mean, but so do OTAs are not much better than that. So how do you make that work?
Yeah, so I think it's also, in a way, it's a bit like maximizing the billboard effect of an OTA. So maybe you need to be listed in the Food Pandas, the Grab, and the Ubers of the world, but you also need to have a direct strategy, right? So that if the customer does know about you and starts having some loyalty to you, they are able to interact with you. So very much like a hotel, except now.
It's exactly the same thing, and it's kind of funny. I don't know, it's ironic watching it develop because the restaurant people, and if you know restaurant people, they're all complaining about this like crazy. Yeah, they charge us commissions like, and then you the
They
things
didn't
like they
care
all
about it before.
no, they didn't. Well, now, but see now, the challenge before it was, okay, the restaurant, the delivery was maybe, 10% of their revenue. So they'd say,
Yes.
yeah, they complain. And then, but now, if it's, more like, 70 or 80%, it's definitely an issue to make it financially viable.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a next question from Kelly. Hi, Kelly. She's an old friend, and she's asking, with all the trends that are happening now with F&B, accelerated by the pandemic, where do we see the next rapid innovation in this area coming from? And do you think we ever will go back to the way it was? Or instead, maybe in the future, we kind of have like this new normal where people only consume restaurants for special occasions, and then on a normal basis, they might just use delivery. So where do you see the...
Well, I mean, the session I was at yesterday, and I'll send, Lehman, I'll send you the link to that because it's really pretty, it's interesting. And they were, and again, it was these restaurant designers. So it was maybe 7 of them or something like that. And some of it was very designy kind of stuff. I was going, yeah. But there was some of it that was, I thought was really insightful, is that there's mixed opinion on that. Some of them were saying, well, fine dining is dead. People are going to prefer to eat at home. And then others were saying, well, and we don't know. Right? In terms of how that's going to play out. I think there's a lot of people who are, right. And the way we feel right now might be different than the way we feel, 2 years from now. But I think, one of the things we're going to see for sure is technology, because restaurant people hate 2 things. Well, I'll start off with 2. They do not like to spend money, period. Really cheap. We could just say they're frugal. They're frugal.
They're
And they
frugal
don't
with technology because they're
and
okay buying the best foie gras.
yeah, but technology, and they're afraid of technology. And they are afraid that, and their fear is, I've seen this, like with, oh, well, no, like online reservations. No. Our customers want to talk to us. Like, no, they don't. The research I've done on this is no, that they actually don't want to talk to you. And so there's that, but it's kind of like, they went, it's like they're hospitality people. So they went into the restaurant business because they like to be with people. And so they like to be with people. So when people don't want to be with them, it's kind of like being insulted. But I think we're going to see a rapid growth of technology. And we've had to adopt it a lot faster the last couple of months, just because of what's been going on. So I think it's going to be with technology. You can kind of look, and then the off-premise dining. Because you think about people who've been through, the stay at, work from home. Or what here it was was it WFH? Every country's got their own initials, and people I know have been doing. It's like, wow, I like spending more time with my family. I like being able to, have your meals the way I wanted to. And some of the restaurants have gotten really innovative with the way that they, the meal packages that they put together and things like that. Why should I go out? Now, in a hotel restaurant, it's a little bit different. I guess you got 2 markets there to consider. One is the outside guests, and whether they're going to, if you have a large market of outside guests, that's going to be an interesting one to see. But it depends on how popular the outlet is, because some of the really popular ones will still draw people back in, and that's what you're counting on right now, right? Because if there's no tourists or no one from outside. But then you're also, with the hotel guests, what are they going to want? And one of the most interesting things, I found it fascinating, is that with VRBO and Airbnb, I figured that their reservation requests would go down. They're going up. But what it is that people want to have control over their environment, and not have someone coming in and out of their room and everything like that, and being exposed to others. And again, that's right now. But because you think about it, you don't have any control. I would think you have no control at all about how clean it is, but people could take their own things to clean. So but it's kind of, that's kind of a sign. I think it'll be technology for sure.
And do you think like the revenue manager post-COVID has to change? Like, what do you think they have to change?
Yeah, well, okay, we could talk about that a lot. Is that I think that one of the biggest problems for revenue management people is that we tend to be way too tactical. And people will say, no, 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 we're strategic. No, most revenue managers are not strategic at all. And so, and talk about getting thrown out of your comfort zone. Well, I could do I mean, I'm working on the forecasting and all this. Well, your data is all bad now because you can't use any of it. And so, I mean, you're going to have to, I mean, you're going to have to become, revenue managers are going to have to become a lot more, well, strategic, but it's also a kind of you're seeing kind of more of a broader picture and creativity. And that's something, you know, when I talk to my students here, they go, oh, we're not very creative. Well, they actually are. But I think that that's one of those things. I mean, you're going to have to go have that question go through your head. Okay, I've got all these constraints. What am I going to do? And you are, as the revenue manager, you're someone who should be either leading that discussion or be very involved, because there are things that you can do that would bring money in, but they might not make money. I mean, they might not be profitable. And you want to be sure that, you know, like with rooms, it's the same thing with other stuff, is that looking at it. And then I think the other thing too is understanding the cost associated with it. And I could sell something and I could sell a lot of them. Let's say it's a bottle of wine that costs $80. If I sell them for 50, I could sell a lot and generate a lot of revenue, but I also generate a lot of loss. And so looking at the financial implications of it.
Yep. So I think the revenue discipline will have to change, right? Because I think in the past, revenue managers tend to be very top line and very technical. But with COVID, and I think with the evolving restaurant industry, you have to be very cost focused. And I think in many ways, if the capacity constraints are changing, you also need to know a bit more about the staff costs as well, right? Because I was reading a case where someone was having a Zoom party for 50 people, and they found someone to deliver 50 cocktails across the island in Singapore so that they could log on and have the party at the same time. And I don't know many establishments that can accomplish that, because you need the resources to do the delivery as well. And those are
I mean, it's a great idea, but it's kind of like, how do they actually make any money? And then I think the other thing is that revenue management has been very focused. There's kind of two parts to revenue management: the inventory management side and the pricing side. The pricing side is going to be a lot more important right now.
Yes.
Because we're not going to, and so that's something that you're really thinking about what that's going to be, because our focus has really been more on kind of opening and closing rates, and you know what rates are going to be and different things. Well, that's different now. And one other thing with it is that if you do have a loyalty program, how are you leveraging that during this?
Yeah, I agree. I think pricing is important, but also about value, about what does the price mean and what is the value out there, and how is that competitive with what they'll get? Because it's far easier to compare prices now with all the platforms available, right?
But then there's some other things too, like for example with delivery, you know, if we're, you know, with F&B, is that, you know, the research I've done on this, and it's been both in Singapore and in the US, customers are perfectly happy with having different prices between delivery and takeaway, and they're actually allowed to, as opposed to most countries can't, like with OTAs, you can't charge different room rates.
Yes.
With restaurants, they can charge different prices. And
Yes.
so there's a lot of pricing wiggle with that. And then, you know, and so, I mean, it's something that, again, when you're talking with your F&B people, the prices for the delivery do not have to be exactly the same as what they are in the restaurant.
Yes. Yes, I've seen that definitely. I mean, I think price integrity is not really as highly lauded as in the hotel industry, right? Because with the rate parity in the hotel industry, everything has to be consistent. But with the delivery platforms and the actual restaurants, I think price parity, surprisingly, is not so consistent.
And it doesn't have to be. I mean, and then the other part with it too is that with delivery, when you get into digital ordering, There's a lot of upselling capability in terms of, well, would you like to get this? Would you like to get that? Whereas with a server, we could train a server and to do that, but sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. With digital, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'll get that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think the upselling and the menu matching and packaging can be a lot better with technology, like more straightforward, right? Than a server mentoring kind of.
Yeah, yeah, more consistent.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a question. This is quite interesting. There has been a lot of credit or vouchers being sold by restaurants. I think someone mentioned in Hong Kong they saw it, but they saw it less in Singapore, for example. What do you think about these kind of initiatives?
I think it's a great idea. I mean, it's just kind of like with hotels. I mean, selling vouchers to generate revenue for the future. So it's kind of like selling, it's kind of like a sporting event or theater selling seasons tickets, right? And so seasons tickets, you really are getting a discount, right? And so having the vouchers for future use, and you know, as long as you you fence it, and so you can use this by the end of next year, or you can use it during these hours and different things like that. And it's kind of, I mean, it is a rate fence. I mean, it's just kind of like a coupon.
Yeah.
Where you, well, how come Lehman's getting a cheaper price? Because she bought that voucher, and so you just have to be very careful with how you fence it. But I think it's a wonderful idea, because what's going on right now, it's the same thing as with hotels, but I don't think it's as extreme. Is that people are nervous about going out, and so you want them to come and try you. And it might be right now, you know, if you just look strictly at restaurants, I mean, you take your food to them, and that makes them happy. But that's also a great, like I got delivery the other night, and food wasn't really very good, but they had put in some kind of a sweet, like some sort of a little dessert. They had just thrown it in. I went, oh,
That's
that's
nice.
nice.
Yes.
But it was just kind of, you know, I remember it. And so there's, you know, there's ways to be doing some marketing right now, but, you know, but I think it's not, you know, for the hotels. I mean, there's a lot more people are looking, but they're not booking. And so I think it's a lot more challenging for rooms than it is for F&B on that side, at least.
Yes. So I think we're going to wrap up soon, but we have a really good question from Pradeep, and I think that's interesting in light of COVID times. But what do you think is the ideal strategy for an F&B operator? You know, considering the platforms and you know what they have to do. What's ideal now?
Well, to quote one of my former colleagues, if I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't be teaching school. I don't know. I think right now, because things are changing so quickly. I mean, seriously though, I think keeping an eye on what the trends are, you're being aware of your competition, it's normal kind of stuff. But I can tell you one thing that won't work if you keep doing it, exactly what you've been doing in the past. That's a sure mesh. That's a sure side for failure.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us today. And thank you, Dr. Kimes, for the session. All the sessions are recorded and the material is available for download. Charlene, when is it available? Unmute.
Sorry. Yes, the unmute button would help, wouldn't it? So everything will be available from the 19th of June. So all the recordings from today.
Yes. All right. So they just need to watch this space, right? And
watch this space and keep on checking back, and we'll also send you an email notification of where to find those replays. And another thing to keep in mind, obviously there are a lot of sessions today, so best thing is just hop onto the HSMAI ROC Home homepage or the website, and you'll actually see what sessions are on the homepage. So a little watch now button will come up, and just tick on that, and if you haven't actually added that to your schedule, you can do that quite easily and watch a session. So next session coming up is actually we've got Dr. Tony Weber actually talking about the state of the Asia Pacific economy. Great. So thanks for your time today. Thank you so much to Professor Sherri and Lehman, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. All right. Thank you. Bye.
Right. Bye.